On July 4, 1974, a massive American ship stopped in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. To anyone watching from a distance, it was a strange but legitimate industrial vessel owned by Howard Hughes. Its supposed job was to test a new idea: mining valuable minerals from the ocean floor. That story was good enough to put in newspapers. It was also almost entirely a lie. Beneath the ship, hidden behind enormous doors in its hull, American engineers were lowering a machine toward something sitting 3 miles below the surface. Not minerals. A Soviet ballistic missile submarine. And the CIA was about to try something no intelligence service had ever attempted on this scale: lift part of that submarine off the bottom of the Pacific, pull it inside an American ship, and leave before Moscow understood what had happened. The most unbelievable part was not that the CIA wanted to do it. It was that, for a while, the plan actually worked. The story began 6 years earlier. In 1968, at the height of the Cold War, the Soviet submarine K-129 left the Kamchatka Peninsula and headed into the Pacific. K-129 was a Golf II class submarine. It carried ballistic missiles armed with nuclear warheads. Then it disappeared. The Soviet Union launched an extensive search, but the Pacific is enormous, and the ocean does not care how important a ship is. Eventually, the Soviets gave up. The United States did not. American intelligence had detected clues that helped narrow the search area. The wreck was eventually located far northwest of Hawaii, resting roughly 16,500 feet below the surface. That depth changed everything. A normal salvage mission was already nearly impossible. A secret salvage mission, conducted under the eyes of the Soviet Union, sounded absurd, but to the CIA, the wreck represented a Cold War treasure chest. Inside could be missile technology, communications equipment, cryptographic material, documents, weapons, and physical evidence showing exactly how a Soviet strategic submarine was built and operated. If the Americans could recover meaningful pieces of K-129, they might learn things the Soviet Union had spent years trying to hide. There was just one problem. The submarine was on the bottom of the ocean. Imagine trying to pick up a wreck weighing hundreds of tons from more than 3 miles away. You cannot see it directly. The load is moving underwater. The ship above is moving with waves and currents. The lifting system must survive enormous forces. And in this case, the entire operation has to look like something else. CIA engineers studied the problem and reached a conclusion that sounds like something from science fiction. They would build a giant mechanical capture device, essentially an enormous claw. A specially designed ship would lower that capture vehicle to the seafloor using long sections of heavy steel pipe. The claw would straddle the wreck. Its jaws would close around the submarine. Then the ship would reverse the entire process, lifting the captured section thousands of feet upward until it could be hidden inside the ship itself. This was not just an intelligence operation anymore. It was an engineering program on the edge of what was technically possible. And even if the machinery worked perfectly, the operation still had another problem. How do you build a giant ship designed to recover a Soviet submarine without anyone asking why you are building a giant ship designed to recover a Soviet submarine? The answer was Howard Hughes. By the early 1970s, Howard Hughes was one of the most famous and unusual businessmen in America. His name was connected to aircraft, movies, technology, enormous private projects, and behavior the public already considered eccentric. That made him useful. The cover story was that Hughes wanted to mine manganese nodules from the deep ocean. It was futuristic. It was expensive. It was strange. And because it was Howard Hughes, strange did not automatically mean suspicious. The vessel built around that story became the Hughes Glomar Explorer. From the outside, it looked like a highly specialized industrial ship. Inside, it was built around a secret. At the center of the vessel was a huge internal docking space, often called the moon pool. Doors in the bottom of the ship could open to the ocean below. The capture vehicle could be lowered through that hidden opening. And if the recovery succeeded, the submarine section could be pulled directly inside, away from aircraft, nearby ships, and satellites. The most sensitive part of the operation could happen beneath the waterline. The ship also carried the equipment needed to handle section after section of steel lifting pipe, lowering the capture system deeper and deeper until it reached the wreck. The deception was not a side detail. It was part of the machine. The ship had to be believable enough to exist in public while being capable of performing a mission almost no one was allowed to know about. For years, that secret held. Then came the summer of 1974. The Glomar Explorer left California and headed into the Pacific. On July 4th, it arrived over the recovery site. That date almost feels invented. An American intelligence ship operating under a billionaire's cover story, preparing to steal part of a Soviet missile submarine on Independence Day. But now the operation had moved beyond plans, models, and engineering tests. Somewhere below the ship was K-129. More than 3 miles of black water separated the wreck from the men trying to reach it. The capture vehicle began its descent. Steel pipe was added section by section. The deeper the system went, the more extraordinary the geometry became. At the top was a ship trying to maintain position in the open Pacific. At the bottom was a wreck that had been lying untouched for 6 years. Connecting them was a lifting system, thousands of feet long. And the Soviets were not completely absent. Soviet vessels appeared near the Glomar and watched. That was the nightmare built into the entire mission. The Americans needed to perform unusual heavy industrial work in the middle of the ocean while Soviet observers were close enough to become curious. The cover story had to survive in real time, so the Glomar kept acting like the ship it claimed to be. Meanwhile, below the surface, the capture vehicle continued toward the submarine. Eventually, the giant mechanism reached the wreck. The capture vehicle had to be positioned around the submarine section with extraordinary precision. Then its jaws closed. For the first time, part of K-129 was physically in the grip of the American recovery system. The lift began. Slowly, the wreck started rising from the seafloor. This was the moment the entire project had been built around years of secrecy, years of engineering, a custom ship, a fake mining business, a giant hidden claw. All of it now depended on whether damaged Soviet steel, sitting under immense pressure for years, could survive the journey upward. At first it did. The submarine rose. The Glomar's crew reversed the lowering process, removing sections of pipe as the captured wreck came closer to the surface. Then the plan met the one thing engineers could never completely control, the wreck itself. During the ascent, part of the submarine broke away. A large section slipped free and fell back toward the ocean floor. Think about what that meant inside the ship. The CIA had built one of the most ambitious covert engineering systems of the Cold War. They had found the submarine, reached it, grabbed it, lifted it thousands of feet, and then watched part of their prize disappear back into the darkness. There was no simple second attempt. The operation was already attracting attention. The machinery had limits, the secrecy had limits, and what remained in the capture vehicle was still moving upward. So they continued. The Glomar successfully recovered the portion that remained in the claw. Exactly how much intelligence the United States obtained has remained partly obscured by secrecy, but the CIA later said the operation contributed to American understanding of Soviet strategic capabilities. What is known includes something far more human. Inside the recovered section were the bodies of 6 Soviet submariners. The Americans gave them a formal burial at sea. Years later, the United States provided Russia with a film of that ceremony. It is a strange moment in the middle of an intelligence story. The men aboard K-129 had been the targets of an operation built to exploit a Soviet military disaster. But when some of those men were finally brought back from the deep, they were treated as sailors who had died at sea. That could have been the end of Project AZORIAN. It was not, because the CIA wanted to go back. The first recovery had failed to retrieve everything the Americans wanted. Planning began for another attempt. The Glomar Explorer could return. The machinery existed. The cover story still existed. The missing section was still on the sea floor. Then the operation was damaged by something no engineer had designed for: a burglary. Before the 1974 mission, thieves broke into offices connected to the Hughes organization in Los Angeles. Among the stolen material were documents that could connect Hughes, the CIA, and the Glomar Explorer. Trying to recover sensitive material brought in more people. The FBI became involved. The Los Angeles Police Department became involved. And the more attention the stolen documents received, the harder it became to keep the larger secret buried. Reporters began hearing rumors. In February 1975, the Los Angeles Times published a story connecting the robbery, Hughes, the CIA, and the submarine recovery operation. Then the story spread nationally. The bizarre deep-sea mining ship was no longer just a strange Howard Hughes project. The world began to understand what it had really been built to do. The cover was collapsing. The exposure created another problem. Journalists wanted confirmation. Had the CIA really built a ship to recover a Soviet submarine? The Ford administration did not want to confirm the operation, but officials also did not want to issue a simple denial that could later be proven false. The result became famous in government and journalism. The United States would neither confirm nor deny the existence of the requested information. That style of answer became known as the Glomar response. A phrase still associated with government secrecy grew out of a ship that had been designed to hide a Soviet submarine inside itself. But the wording could not restore the mission. By the summer of 1975, the Soviet Union understood enough to watch the recovery site. The White House canceled the next attempt. The part of K-129 that had fallen away would remain on the bottom. Project AZORIAN did not achieve everything its planners wanted, but that may be the wrong way to measure it. The CIA had taken a problem that sounded impossible and pushed it through years of engineering, deception, shipbuilding, intelligence work, and operational risk. They built a 600-foot class vessel around a secret compartment. They constructed a giant capture system. They lowered it more than 3 miles into the Pacific. They physically grabbed part of a Soviet ballistic-missile submarine while Soviet ships were nearby, and they brought a piece of it back. The operation failed at the exact point where its ambition becomes easiest to understand. The machine worked. The deception worked. The ocean almost cooperated. The broken submarine did not, and that is what makes the story so unusual. For years, two superpowers built weapons designed for a war neither side wanted to fight. Then, one of those weapons vanished into the Pacific. And instead of leaving it there, the United States secretly built an entire industrial fantasy around Howard Hughes, just to reach down into the dark and take it. The public saw a mining ship. The CIA saw a locked Soviet vault 3 miles underwater. For one extraordinary summer, they actually managed to open it.